and it's thinking about it. Okay, well, hello and good evening to everybody who are joining us live on YouTube, or indeed watching via YouTube later after the live event. We are all ready to go, I do believe. I'm going to get the thumbs up very shortly because there is a lag on YouTube of 30 seconds. But I'm babbling at the beginning, which is never good. So I'm going to go straight on and get on with it. So hello, good evening and welcome officially. Hello and welcome to Lightroom 101. This is the first in what was going to be a 3-part series of live sessions dedicated to all things Lightroom. You're worried now, aren't you? Was going to be. But the good news right off is I've extended it to include an extra session specifically aimed at helping you switch from Aperture to Lightroom. So more details on that later. But for those who don't know me, I'm Elaine Giles. I'm a trainer for a long time. Oh, don't say how long. You'd be terrified. And I currently present the Map Bites podcast. I am also the Adobe User Group Manager of the official Adobe User Group in the northwest of England. And we have meetings online like this one, and we have meetings in person too. So if you're in the area and we have a meeting, pop along and say hi. But back to our topic tonight, and that is Lightroom from Adobe. And the very first consideration is how to acquire Lightroom. It is still available as a boxed product. Now that surprises a lot of people because that is unlike the rest of Adobe's creative applications, which are now solely available via the Creative Cloud. Now, if you've got Creative Cloud, then you have got Lightroom, because Lightroom is also available as part of a Creative Cloud subscription. The latest version of Creative Cloud 2014 launched back in June, and as I say, Lightroom is part of the available applications within there. But it is also available as a much cheaper alternative dedicated for photographers as part of the Creative Cloud Photography program, which is 3 applications for £8.78 a month with a minimum 1-year subscription. Now, that's a great deal when you compare it to the usual price of $17.58 for a single application. Now, that was a special deal, and it was one of these get it now or lose it deals, but that is now a permanent deal. But right now, so we are today, the 14th of August 2014, if you were to subscribe to that today, you would only pay £7.49 a month. And that offer is available until the 29th of August 2014. There is a link available for that, which is creative.adobe.com/plans/photography. And I will make sure that that is in the comments under the YouTube video, and I shall put it into the chat because we have people live in a chat room in Connect too. So you can go and sort that out there right now. Now, if you were with us last month, I was singing the praises of Adobe Bridge. So you might be sitting there thinking, well, why not use Adobe Bridge instead of Lightroom? Well, as I said last month, Bridge is much more general than Lightroom. Bridge supports file formats from other Creative Cloud apps, not just photos, not just video. It is not intended to do the same job that Lightroom does, but there is a lot of overlap between them. So if you don't have Lightroom, but you do have Bridge, which that could happen. You might say, how on earth would that happen? That might happen if you've paid for a single application, probably Photoshop in Creative Cloud. That would give you Bridge, but it wouldn't give you Lightroom. That's why that photography program is such a good deal. So that's how that could have happened. But if you've got both, as I say, a lot of overlap, not intended to do the same job that Lightroom does. Lightroom, each and every feature inside Lightroom is optimized for photography and photographers. It supports image formats and video, but that's it. So like I said, Bridge supports many more file types, but it is not dedicated to the needs of photographers. Lightroom has photo management, processing, photo books, websites, slideshows, all sorts of features dedicated to photography. It handles images and video, JPEGs, Photoshop files, TIFF files, RAW files. All of the editing within Lightroom is non-destructive. You've got extensive handling of metadata. You've got batch processing, web galleries, watermarking, all sorts of things. Now, if you are still thinking, I'm not sure, then check out kelby1.com/100ways. And that is a series of 100 reasons why Lightroom is better than Bridge for photography. So that's a good place to start if you're in two minds as to which system you should use. Now, before we go into it, it's really useful to understand the concept behind Lightroom and how it handles your images and edits to those images. So what we've got here is your images live in folders on your hard drive on the left-hand side of that slide. You can have a whole hierarchy of folders. You're not limited to a single folder. And within there, you can put your images wherever you like. You can also use an internal hard drive or an external, that's fine. Actually, there are benefits to using an external hard drive because it makes your library more portable. Now, what happens then is Lightroom reads these images when it imports them, and you decide which images and where to put them. And we'll see that in the demonstration. This is just an overview of what will actually happen. Once Lightroom knows where your images are, it then manages the changes and the refinements that you make to them in its catalogue, which is on the right-hand side there. And the catalogue is a database of your library. You can have more than one catalogue, you're not limited to one. The important thing to understand about that is that your original images are safe in your folder structure on your hard drive. No changes that you make in Lightroom are written back to the actual images. All those changes are stored in the catalogue on the right-hand side there. Now, the idea is that once the initial import of your images is done, your originals in your file system and the Lightroom catalogue become completely transparent in use. You focus your energies on working in Lightroom and not really managing what I'd call the plumbing. Managing the images themselves, the data that relating to those images, they all just fade into the background and you concentrate on your images inside Lightroom. So let's go into a live demo of Lightroom and have a look at how that works in practice. Now, as I say, keep the questions coming. I will answer some as we go along and I'll answer others at the end. So do keep those questions coming. But for now, let's go and have a look at Lightroom. Now, I've started Lightroom. If you have not started Lightroom, the first thing it will do is prompt you to make a library, a catalogue. And that is, if you think back to that slide that I've just discussed there, that is where Lightroom will manage your images, but you're not actually importing all of the images. So what we've got here is a catalogue, but it is a completely empty catalogue. There are no images in it at all. So what I'm going to do is just take you quickly around the interface. There's a lot there. There is a lot of interface, and I use the term chunky. It's a very chunky interface. If you're used to iPhoto or Aperture, the interface looks much smaller. This looks like big, bold buttons, where Aperture, it's quite tiny. Now, the other thing to remember is I'm running my screen here at 1600 by 900. If you have a bigger screen than that, and to be honest, most screens are bigger than that these days, then you will have more room to maneuver within Lightroom. If I were to make my screen, mine I'm running at the moment is on an iMac, 27-inch iMac. If I were to make that as big as I could, you would have a very tough time seeing it. That's why I've made it smaller. But in reality, you will probably have a little bit more room to maneuver than it looks like I've got here. So starting with the interface, at the top you have a little bit in the top left-hand corner that says Get Started with Lightroom Mobile. Now, what on earth is that all about? Well, very recently, Adobe released Adobe Lightroom Mobile for iPad and then followed that up with an iPhone version. And in order to use those versions of Lightroom, you need to connect your desktop version of Lightroom with the mobile version. And how you do that is via your Adobe ID. So you will need an Adobe ID to make that work. And what this is referring to up here is, as I hover over it, so let me just show you that there, that changes. So you can see as I get nearer to it, the disclosure triangle pops down. And what that actually wants me to do when I click on it is to sign in to Adobe. So sign in using my Adobe ID. Now I'm going to leave that because we're looking at that next time. In September, we are looking at Lightroom Mobile. So I'm going to leave that alone at the moment. It won't make any difference to how Lightroom functions on the desktop. But that's what it's there for. Once I've signed into that, I'll be able to set what's called an identity plate. And all that means is a little logo that represents me or my business in the top left-hand corner of Lightroom. Then coming down on the left-hand side of the screen, you have a whole range of options. And I'm going to fold all of these up with their disclosure triangles, because what you're seeing there is the complete default view. I have done nothing with this at all. And what you've got here at the top, you have your navigator. That will let you navigate images in terms of zooming them. You've then got catalogues, the information about your catalogue, then folders, then collections, and at the moment I don't have any of those, and published services, and all of those are contained in the left hand sidebar, and they will stay there. As I move around Lightroom, all those info blocks there will stay where they are, so you have like an anchor point to go back to and know exactly where you are and where you're working. On the right hand side I have another one of those. And again, I'm going to fold those up just to show you that you can make the interface a little bit easier to work with. Starting at the top, you have your histogram. You've got your quick develop and keywording, keyword lists, metadata and comments. Now, those sidebars take up quite a bit of room, and if you want to focus just on your images, then let me just show you that in a zoom view. You can just about see that. It's just popping off onto the other monitor. That there, if I click that, it will move that down and it will hide it. So I'm moving across here to do the same to that one, and it gives you more room to work. So that one should have popped down. There we go, that's better. So now you've got more room to work. But if you want to bring those back, you only have to hover over. You don't have to click. You can hover over to temporarily bring them back. But if you want to bring them back permanently, you can just click on them and that will bring them back. The area in the middle is like a canvas area in Photoshop. So that is where you will work with your images. Now, the whole of Lightroom, and this goes back right to the beginning, actually I use the alpha of Lightroom. And Lightroom is built on modules. And when they add functionality, when Adobe build functionality, they tend to build it in terms of a new module. When Lightroom started, it had 4 modules. It had library, develop, print and web, I do believe. And now we've got 3 extra ones. So the library module is where you would manage your files. You would import via here, you would manage your files. Once you've got your photos in, you will move on to the develop module. And then you have this extra odd module called map. And that will read in GPS information from your images if there is any. Now, modern cameras do tend to write GPS information to the images. Both my cameras are old enough not to do that. But I will be showing you how, because I'm going to use my camera live tonight, that doesn't matter. You can add that information, the GPS information, retrospectively. The other 4 modules, book, slideshow, print and web, are all to do with outputting from Lightroom. At the bottom, you have a thumbnail track. Now, this will make much more sense when we've got some thumbnails, but that is where you can navigate your images by sliding across the thumbnails. So the very first thing to do here is to import some images. So as I said, I have a camera here. Let me just put that near the microphone and let's see if you can hear it. You may have just heard that turn on and the lens pop out. What I'm going to do is to take a picture of my desk live. And the reason that I'm doing that, you will know it's live because if you're with us on the call live tonight, the time and date will be correct. So I'm just about to take an image. So I'm going to have to move back a little bit. And I have actually managed to take an image, and that is my squeaky chair that you can hear. So I have some images. Now, I did take some images before, but I have taken just the one, and that's not too bad at all. You can see something. Some of the others are terrible. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking my card out of the camera, and I am popping it into a card reader. And then what I'll be doing is attaching it to my machine. Making sure that Lightroom is the active application, what I'm hoping is that Lightroom will recognise that I have put in a card. So squeaky chair again while I move. I've just popped it in. So hopefully the system is having a look at it and Lightroom's found it, and there you go. There are some shocking images on there, as you can see. Some of them were supposed to be bad, honest. Right, so this is the import dialog box, and this is where a lot of the magic happens. You can do so much in this dialog box. When I've trained Lightroom before, I think I spent about 40 minutes going through this dialog box, and the reason I spent so long doing it was once you've set everything up in here, you pretty much can sit down with your images and just work with them. You don't have to add any keywords or metadata within Lightroom. The whole lot can be done in here. But I'm not going to be spending that long on it tonight. I'm just going to show you the basics tonight. What it's showing you is it's saying from SD card. Now, SD card is actually the name of this card. It is a 2 gig card and it has just got those images on that I have taken today. And this window, like Lightroom, is split into 3 areas. You have the left-hand side, which is your source panel. Then in the middle, you have your preview, and over on the right, you have all of the options that you can apply to these images as you import them. So what I've got here on the left-hand side, it's saying this device is the device we're looking at. If that's the wrong device, you can click here and you can choose other options, but that is right, it's coming from the card. The first option is to eject after import. That's really to keep your card safe so you don't have it attached to your machine and forget to put it back in the camera. You've also got here where it says files. So devices at the top and then files. Now devices is referring to the actual card that's attached. Files is referring to my hard drives, my Macintosh HD, and I have 3 hard drives attached to this. Work in progress, WIP, my documents drive and a scratch drive, which is where I put the stuff that I'm working on. NetShare is another drive that's attached, but it's attached via the network and an Airport Extreme. And finally, I've got my little SD card at the bottom. So because I'm working with a card, I don't even have to think about that. I don't have to worry about anything on the left-hand side. So moving across to the middle, what I do here is choose the images that I want imported. And with these, I'm going to import them all. Some of them are totally shocking. They are overexposed, they are out of focus, the lot. But I'm going to tidy them up later. I don't want to do the triage on these thumbnails. I actually want to see the big images. Maybe some of them are salvageable, she said, hopefully. So I'm going to import them all, and I can do that. At the moment, that's the default. But if I take the tick out of that box, I can choose to import just the ones I think are good enough. But as I say, I'm going to go here for all photos. Now, if you had other images on this card that you've imported before, you could use this new photos option, and that would show you just the ones that you haven't imported before. Now, I've got 2 options at the top. I can either copy these as a DNG, which is a digital negative format, or I can copy them as they are. Now my camera is a Canon. It is a Canon G9 and it produces raw images in the CR2 format. So I could elect to import those in that format, or I could go for DNG, but I can't elect to move or add. So at the top there, I've got 2 options that are black. So when they're black, I can't select them. And that's because for your own safety's sake, Lightroom doesn't let you move those images from this card. You've got to copy them either just as a copy or copy as a DNG. Now I've already got a question. Which should you copy as, CR2 or DNG? Completely up to you. The idea is that DNG is a neutral format, so that anything can read it. It was brought in as a standard. Now CR2, as old as this camera is, can pretty much be read by anything anyway, but a Canon RAW file is proprietary, whereas a DNG is not supposed to be. So you may decide to convert them to DNGs for that reason. The other reason is you generally find that a DNG tends to be a little bit smaller file size wise, so you might want to do it for that reason. I'm going to leave these as they are. So at the moment I've not changed anything here. I've explained it and I've moved through it, but I've not actually changed anything. That might change as I move over to the right, because what I've got over on the right hand side is, and I'm folding these up just like we did in the interface of Lightroom, I've got 4 options here. So I'm going to start off with file handling, and the very first option right up here is build previews, and it's set to standard. Now if you've never been in Lightroom before, yours won't be set to standard. The default is minimal. Now, which should you go for? Well, building previews, as the name implies, is just going to do that. It's going to look at those raw images that are huge, that take a few seconds each to load in at a minimum, and it's going to build a thumbnail of them, a preview of them. And what you're saying up here is the size of that preview. Do you want a minimal one? Do you want to embed it and create a sidecar file? Do you want a standard size image? Or do you want a one-to-one preview? Now, I would stick to either minimal or standard, because minimal is much quicker at this stage. On your import, it's going to be much, much faster to import them if you say minimal. But you'll thank me later if you make them standard, because you'll be able to see things much better without having to worry about it loading in and slowing Lightroom down later. So your choice is, you either save time once now, or you save time down the line every time you work with those images. And that's why I choose standard. You also have another option here, which is to build smart previews. Now, we'll be talking much more about smart previews when we look at Adobe Lightroom Mobile, but you could elect to build these here. If you've already imported images and you didn't build smart previews, you can do it later. So everything you do in here, you can pretty much change most of it later, so don't worry about that. Then there's an option to not import suspected duplicates. I tend to turn that off because I want complete control over what it's importing. So I do tend to turn that off. It might think that something's a duplicate, and I might know better than that no, it's not. To be honest, on a camera card, it's unlikely to think something's a duplicate because it's time and date stamped and each has a unique number. But when you're importing from your hard drive, it may find them with the same name and it may make the decision that they are duplicates. You also have an option here to make a second copy when you are importing it. So this will build you a backup automatically. You don't have to think, once I've imported it, I've then got to go and make a backup. It will do it for you. So I'm going to say, yes, we will have that. Do that on import. And it lets me choose a location here. And that location by default is in your pictures folder, in a folder called Lightroom, and downloaded backups. Now obviously that's your main hard drive, and if you've got an SSD and it's quite small, you might want to change that to a backup destination. For speed today during the demo, I'm going to leave that there, but personally I would back that up to an external drive. Then you can opt to rename your files on import. So if you tick the box, you've got templates you can choose. So all of those come with Lightroom, but if you want to name them something else, you can do that by clicking Edit, going in and creating your own file template, so file name template, with all of the options here, and then adding that into the file renaming option. So if I go in there, I could make changes to that. I'm going to leave that alone for the moment. We just need to get these in here. And I'm not actually going to rename these, so I'm going to turn all of this off in a minute. But I could change the extension as well. I'm going to leave that as it is. And it gives me a sample there. So it's saying custom name untitled. It's the untitled bit that I put in here. So if I just wanted to put there EKG at the beginning, because I may have multiple people taking images and I just want to know that these were the ones I took, then that's how I would do that. So I'll leave it like that. I won't turn it off. Let's leave it like that and make sure that that works. So I've done my file handling. I've sorted out my renaming. Next thing is what I want to happen during import. And you could actually apply some presets during the import. Now, I'm not going to look at presets today. I'm going to look at that in our third session, which is automating Lightroom, and that's in October. But I am going to look at some metadata. So at the moment, I have no metadata there, but I can create some new metadata presets. And this is how I would do that. So I'm going to put my preset name of Elaine, and then some information. So I'm going to want some basic information, which is my copyright name. So I can put in there my copyright name and any labels that I want, any captions that I want. And if I don't want those, then I actually turn them off up here and they just go away. So the basic info is going to be written to it. I could put my camera information in, and as I scroll this, you can see just how much information I could actually put in at this stage. One of the good things to put in is your IPTC creator information and your copyright stuff. So that is something that I would tend to take time to do. What I'm going to do at the moment is I'm just going to put in the copyright there 2014, and I'm going to put as the creator, I'm just going to put me. And once I've got that, I'm going to create that. And now in my meta, I have created a preset. So I used to say none, and now I've got my preset, and you can create pretty much as many of those as you want. So I'm going to come out of there. I've got the metadata, and the last thing in the meta that I can put in is keywords. So in here, it makes sense for me to put desk. It probably makes sense for me to put iMac, pretty much they're my iMac, and I'll put demonstration. And what will happen is it will write all of those keywords to these images on import. So my job will be done. I won't have to worry about adding those later. And then my final option is my destination. Now this one is very important. Do you want these into a subfolder? Now, if I don't put them into a subfolder, they're going to be organised by date, and it's actually showing me where it will put them. So taking it from the top, I do want these into a subfolder. And in fact, no, I won't. What I'll do is I'll leave them by date. And I can choose the date format. I organise my photos by date. So from the options here, these are the options you have for the date format. So you can have it by year and then by month and day, or you can have it with the year. So all of these options. Now the one that I particularly like is this one at the very bottom. I don't have any strange characters in it. I just make it the year, the month and the day. So that one's sorted there. And then I have, that's my date format there. So when I look down the bottom, so let's have a look here, it's going to put it in my pictures folder, which is, if you know the Mac, it's from your user folder, which is Elaine G, into pictures, into a folder, which is going to be the date. Now I also have this Lightroom folder. We're going to look at that in a minute, so don't worry about that. Okay, it's going to put them into that folder because they were all taken today. But if I had a range of images that hadn't been taken today, it would sort them out into the relevant folders based on the date that they were taken. And that's it for importing them. That's all I'm going to do with them. I could do a lot more than that, but I'm not going to do a lot more than that. I'm just going to make sure that they get put in there. That isn't actually where they should be, and I know some of you are thinking that. Some of you are thinking, but don't you need a top-level folder? I'm going to break this shortly, and then I'm going to fix it. So at the moment, I'm just going to import that, and that is going to read all of those off the card, and things are happening over here on the left. It's taken me into my library view at the top, and it's loading in those images and it's building the previews as it goes. It's also said I've ejected that card, it's all done. So now what you need to see is where it's put it, and all of the backups and everything else. So let's have a look at that. Here is a Finder window, and it's looking at my pictures folder. So from my user folder down into pictures, and there are my pictures folder. And what you will have is something similar to this. If you have some applications that save images, you will probably have something that looks like this. I have an Xscope and Snap Ruler and Snagit and Monosnap, which all take screenshots, and they put them in their own folder in my pictures folder. I also have an iPhotos library, so that's there. And then I have this Lightroom folder that's created automatically for you when you install Lightroom. And what you will find in there is your catalogue. So that's what's in that folder. But there is the download backups as well. That's the folder I told it to back up to. So let's make sure that it did that backup as well. Should have my images in there. And there is the backup organised by date. So that's done as well. And my photos were imported to this folder, which is today's date. So let's open that up. And we should see my photos, and they've been renamed as well according to what I specified. So there they all are. That is exactly as I would expect and hope it to work. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this shortly, so I'm moving that out of the way onto my other screen. And here are my images. There they are. So within the library view, you can start working with them. So just to show you some things that have changed, which is over on the left-hand side, it's now saying all photos, 11 of them. That's all the 11 photos that I've imported. There's nothing in the quick collection. We're going to look at collections shortly. It's telling me that the last time I imported images, there was 11 of them. That's correct. It's also showing me folders. So I'm going to close the catalogue up now and focus here on just the folders. And it's telling me that I have this folder on my Macintosh HD. If I click on there, those are the images that are inside it, and that is correct. So you are actually looking here straight through Lightroom into your file system on your Mac. And within there, there are the 11 images. Now, when it comes to actually working in Lightroom, you may find that working with them in folders is a bit limiting. And because of that, you can create collections. But I'm just going to finish going through the interface, and then we're going to look at the images and create a collection for them. Collections are the next option down, and you already have some collections. They are smart collections. And when you open them up, they have the icon which indicates that they are smart collections, and a smart collection automatically updates as you add images to Lightroom. So what's a collection? Collection is just a group of images from your Lightroom catalogue. They do not have to be from the same folder. In fact, the use of collections means that they definitely don't have to be in the same folder. You can create a collection by choosing all of your 5-star picks, which is what this collection does, all of the ones that you've tagged red, which this one does, and so forth. Now, you may say, yes, but I've just got 25 images that are my favourites. They're not all 5 stars, but they're my favourites, and I want to look at those together. And that's when you create a standard collection. So as I say, we're going to create some collections shortly. So let's fold those up. And we have publishing options that I'm going to come on to as well. So what we need to do with these images, first of all, is triage them. How bad are they? Well, at the moment, they're in thumbnail view. They're a little bit small, and I've got lots of grey space. So down here, I can actually make the thumbnails bigger. So I can actually make the thumbnails much more useful. There they are. But if I want to work in thumbnail view, I've also got this single image view here, where I can bring that up and see the actual image, not exactly full screen, but certainly bigger on the canvas. And as you can see, that one's a bit underexposed. But I could probably salvage it. I could probably do something with it. So I'm going to keep that image. What I'm now doing is triaging my images. That one's not too bad. I could do something with it. I'm using my arrow keys to go across and mark these images. Now, in this case, that one, I want to pick it. I don't want to reject that image. I want to pick it. And if I just press the P key, it flags it as a pick. So the other way to do that is to click the little flag icon at the bottom. So I'm going to pick that one and then use my arrow keys to move on to the next one. That's much better. That one's actually light. We can see what's going on. So I'm going to pick that one as well. So P key again to pick that one. Arrow key to move on. That one is horrific. It's far too overexposed. But it is a raw image. I could probably do something with it. And that was just showing you that there's my card reader plugged into my USB hub there, neatly under my other monitor. But I'm going to say no, I don't want that one. And I'm going to do that by pressing the X key, which is set that as rejected. And I don't want to work with that one. I'm just going to carry on with this. That one's not brilliant either, so I'll reject that one. That one's much better. So P to pick that one. And just work through the images like that. So let's reject that one. Wrong keyboard. That's the keyboard I'm using. So P to pick that one. Keep moving across. No, I won't have that one. Reject that one. Move across. No, terrible. Reject that one. Another one out of focus. Reject that one. And that one is the one I've just taken live. There you all are. You can see some of you that are listed there, and you can see my desktop. So let's pick that one. So P to pick that one. So that's triaging my images. Now, what was the point in all that? Well, I would like to work and create a collection of those images of the ones that I've picked. So if we go back to the smart collections, did we have anything there for picked? And no, there wasn't. So what I need to do here is actually filter these images somehow. So if I go into develop to have a look at that image, and it's thinking about it, it's taking me in there and it's thinking about it. And what I've got down here is my filter. So I have this bar at the bottom here, and I want to just see the images that I flagged, the ones I picked. And as soon as I hit that, it filters down to just the images that I picked. These are the ones that I wanted to work with. So a way to filter your images there. And then I would actually start working on that and developing with it. But before I do that, I'm going to import some more images so we've got more images to play with. And I have a zip file. And in my zip file, I have some images that are sample images. So what I'm doing here is showing you this. This is my zip file. I'm going to double click that. You can download these images. The link for that is, it's one of the links that I will put up during the end of the presentation when I look at my slides. But this is what you've got here. You've got your license to use them, and you have the sample files, and they are DNG format. So we will have some digital negatives to work with. Now, I've imported from a card. This time I want to import from the file system. So moving that out of the way, going back into Lightroom, and I will go to the library module, but I don't need to. And I want to import photos and video. And this time it's saying, right, I think you've just opened this zip file, and I think that's the folder, and it's quite right. Users, my username, desktop, in that folder, and there are the images, and I want to import all of these. The difference between this and doing it from the card, okay, is that this time you can move the images and you can elect to add the images, or you could copy them, or you could copy them as DNG. I'm going to go for copy again to make sure I've got my originals as a backup. But this time it's asking me, well, where do you want to put these images? And as I look over here, I've got 2 dates. And these images were taken in 2013 on 2 different days. So it has suggested those folders based on the settings that I specified last time. And I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to say that's absolutely fine. And I'm not going to do anything else with it. I'm just going to import them as they are like that. And that's exactly what it will do. So hit import there. And what's happening is the folder structure is building up here. It's showing me those folders. And as I click on each of those folders, that's today's, and those are the images from Italy that I've just imported, these sample images. Now, what will happen to you at some point is that your Lightroom catalogue and your images will become detached, because I've done something terribly wrong here. If we look at my pictures folder, it's starting to get messy. I've got these folders and they've got my images in all right, but are these the ones I've imported into Lightroom? Are they all my photos? What are they? There's no top level folder. So what is better practice to do here is for me to create a new folder and call that my Lightroom library. And what I mean by that, not library, right, what I want there is to put these in there, and then I know they're the photos that I've added to Lightroom. They are the actual originals from Lightroom. So I'm just going to do that in my folder system. Just add them to the Lightroom library. And that's all I've done. I've moved those 3 folders. Now my picture folder is much more organised. I have my catalogue in the Lightroom folder and my photos in the Lightroom library folder. So let's move that out of the way and go back to Lightroom. What will Lightroom make of that? And if you were very quick there, you will have noticed that I've now got question marks next to all of these folders, and Lightroom is screaming at me, what did you do? Where did you put them? Where have the images gone? But it can still see them. Lightroom can still see these images. I can go in and I can say, yep, there's an image. I can use my arrow key and move between all the images. So although Lightroom can't find them, they're still there. So how did that happen? What happened there was, because I elected to build the previews, I can carry on working in Lightroom even though it can't find the original images. Now that should tell you that's fantastic. That means that if you've got your images, these huge images on an external drive, and your external drive isn't plugged in, that's not a problem. You can still carry on working in Lightroom. It isn't an issue. You can work with these previews. At some point, you're going to have to marry the 2 back together, and that can be done. If what happened was you ejected the drive, it's a simple matter of plugging it back in. But if you did what I did, which was move the folders, then it's a little bit more manual to come in here and organise that. But I'll show you how easy it is to do. I go to the folder, the first one it can't find, and I right-click and say Find Missing Folder. And it goes to my library folder because it's found it. But if it hadn't and it had only gone to pictures, I would go to library and then make sure that I've clicked the right folder, which was the 17 one at the top, and OK on that. And straight away, that links the 2 back up and everything's back in sync. It knows where it is. And I'm going to do exactly the same on here with the others. So just quickly go through all of those. That one is 29 at the end, and the last one is today's with my other one in it. So find missing folder, and it is the bottom one, and that's it for doing that. So if you do see that and you think, what have I done? It's really simple to fix it, and that's how easy it is to do that. So let's have a look at what we've got when we come to develop these images. So first of all, we need a quick collection, don't we? I'm going to make a collection so you can see how easy it is. Here are some of the images from Italy, and I'm going to flick here between the loop view, which is what this is, and the grid view, using G for grid and not that one. Let me go, there we go, G for grid, go back to the grid. Now, what I want in here is, I want these and this one adding to a collection called Italy. So I'm going to go back there to the first one, and I'm going to select all of these images. So Command and A, Control and A to select them all, and then go over to Collections and just hit the plus option. And in there, I've got three options. Do you want to create a collection, a smart collection, or a collection set? Now, a collection is a standard collection, and that's what I want. A smart collection is where you're using the metadata to define what images should be in that collection. So I'll create one of those in a minute, but let's just say a collection at the moment. And I want this to be called Italy. These are the photos from Italy. And I can create new virtual copies and all of the rest of it, but I'm keeping it very simple, and I'm just going to create a collection. And now I have a collection in my collections section here called Italy with 14 photos in it. But this one is also Italy, and I want to add that to my Italy collection. And all I need to do is just drag and drop that onto the collection name, and now I don't care when they were taken. I'm working with them because they were in Italy. They're all in my collection. Now, the type of smart collection that I could create, so let's go and create a smart collection, is based on something. So this is where you would say inside a collection set or match all of the following and then choose something. So what if I were to say the camera is, and I would want to put something like G9 in there. I'd have to check that it is my camera. It's the right thing to put in there. But if you put in there something that matches your camera, and it could even be a serial number, you'll notice there that one of the options was the serial number for a camera. So either the camera, the lens, the focal speed, whatever. You can do that as well and then just create, and you've now got a smart collection. My camera's obviously not called G9, so I would need to do that or find the serial number, but that's what that would do for you. So here is my collection, and the collection is how you work with your images. So we're moving on to developing these now. And moving on to the develop section. Now I'm going to fold these up. Let's lose these and let's drill down through them one by one. There we go. So these are the images I'm working with at the bottom, and I can navigate through them very simply here. So I'm going to choose this one to start with. And the first thing I've got is my navigator, and that lets me fill the screen or go 1 to 1, go 3 to 1, fit it to the screen. I can do all of that in there. Then I've got presets. Now I'm not talking about presets today, that's in Automating Lightroom. I've also got snapshots, I'm going to look at that, but we are going to look at the history. Everything that you do to an image is listed in that history. So don't worry about undo, undo, undo. Use the history to go back through it. And then there's the collections, and the collections are what will let me navigate without going back to my library and choosing another set of images. I can access my collections directly from here. But what we're interested in is actually doing something with these images, developing these images. So I'm going to start work on this one, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. I'm just going to change it radically. Now, I am going to do this, so warning up front. You're probably not going to like the finished product, but I'm going to make it quite radical so you can see a big difference. So taking it from the top, we have at the top the histogram. And if you've ever seen a histogram in Photoshop, Pixelmator or anything else, it's exactly the same. It's showing you the distribution of the pixels within the image. And I can tell from that histogram that it's a pretty decent image. If you see a histogram and there's very little in the left-hand side of it, then the image is probably overexposed. If there's very little on the right-hand side, it's probably underexposed. So you're looking for something that's quite an even layout with it, and that's what you've got there. We're going to come back to the histogram because it's showing us something we can't quite see at the moment. But coming down, you have in the basic section here, and we've got lots of sections, as you can see. In the basic section, you've got all the changes that you can make to this particular image. So I'm going to go through and change everything here, and then you will see that happening to that image. So the first thing I can do is change the temperature, which will warm the image up. As I take it right across, you can see it looks like the 1970s, tangoed. So I would take it across a little bit, but I wouldn't go too far. I would warm it up a little bit, but not too much. You can see what happened as I did that. Over on the history, it's saying that the temperature has been changed. So there's the first change. Now I'm going to work through with a tint. You want to tint it down so it's sort of a bluey green colour, which I don't. I want to warm it up slightly. You can change the exposure here. So you can make it as though you had completely used a different set of settings on your camera, or underexpose it. Now, it's not badly exposed. I think I might up it a fraction, but not too much. You can change the contrast, but there's a better way to do that, so I'm going to leave the contrast alone. The highlights are what lets you change the light areas of the image. So if I wanted the highlights much brighter, I would do that, or take it and make the highlights much lower. So if I've got blown out highlights, then I would take the highlights right down. I'm going to leave them alone. So I need to get it back to the middle. And the quickest way to do that is to just double click on the word highlight, and it takes the slider back to the middle. That's far easier than trying to drag it or type in 0. So I've got the shadows as well, so I might want to add a little bit of light to the shadows. So bringing back detail around that area there. So this area here that was very, very dark. Now I'm coming on to the whites and blacks, and taking the whites and blacks together is a very good way for you to really replicate the contrast, but do it in a very precise way. So first of all, let me take the whites up, and you can see I'm starting to blow it out. It's really far too blown out. I take the whites down, it takes it down, but where's right? Well, there's a trick to that, and that is to hold down the Alt key or the Option key. So first of all, I'm going to take that back to the middle, and as I hold that down and I click, the whole screen goes black, and as I start to slide across to the right, I start to get little red dots, and the further I go, I get more red. What that's showing me is where is white in the image. And I don't want everything blown out, so I'm just going to let you see just a little bit of red in it, and then let go. That is the correct white point for that image. Doing exactly the same on the black, holding it down, and this time going across to the left, you can start to see the darkest areas of the image. So if I want the darkest areas really dark, I would take it across like that, and that's what it would look like. That's far too dark. But taking that back a bit and taking it just to where I can just about start to see the very dark areas, which is just around the bottom of these boats, and that's about right. Carrying on down here, I've got clarity, which if I take that across, you should see it clearing it. Well, first of all, it would be easier if I take it the other way. If you know something called the Orton effect, taking the clarity to the left creates slightly like an Orton effect. Very blurry, very fuzzy. It's not a bad effect if that's what you're looking for, but taking it the other way makes the image clearer. So I'm going to take it over to the right, make that image a bit clearer. I am going to add a lot more colour to this. I want it very vibrant. I want it like a postcard. And postcards are all oversaturated, aren't they? I know this is overdone. It's a demonstration. That's why. I wouldn't do this in reality, I promise you. But we've made a lot of changes to that image. The one change I'd like to make, though, is the rest of it looks great, but the sky looks a bit grey by comparison. Now, I could add a lot of blue into there and make the sky much bluer. So now the sky looks fabulous, but the rest of the image looks terrible. So I am going to undo that. So it's good, apart from the fact the sky just needs more blue in it. Well, you can do that. You can fix things in here just like Photoshop. Only all of this is non-destructive. So I'm going over here and I'm choosing this option, which is a graduated filter. So going there and I'm drawing on a filter. There's my filter. Not doing anything at the moment because what I've got here over on the right, so let's have a look at all of these options. All of these are now what I'm going to change. So I've inadvertently clicked there. I'm going to undo that. All I want to do is just show you those at the moment. These are all the things you can change. And what I want to change here is the temperature. I want to make it much bluer. And look what happens when I do that. As I take it across there, I get more blue in the sky. Now, it's not overdone, it's just a tinge of blue at the moment. But if I increase the saturation, I should get much more blue. And if I now drag this down, then the sky will become bluer. So I've got much more blue in that sky there. And I could change the exposure, I could make it darker. You see what's happening? I'm getting much more blue, so I keep bringing this down so it's in just the right place. That's far too much. So I will take that back so it's not too overdone. I don't want it to look not natural. It's going to look as though it's been tinkered with, but I don't want it to look silly. So I've now added that to it. So I'm going to come out of that mode. I'm now back into my global mode. So I've done all of that. I've definitely made changes to it. But what did it look like before? Well, there's a trick to that. If you hold down the backspace, the back backslash. So just hold down the backslash, which is one to the right of the enter key, and it shows you your before. And when you let go, it shows you your after. So that's why I really overdid that. So you could see that it is making a huge difference to that image, both globally and selectively where I've done the sky. So in reality, I would now move on to my next image. Here's my next image. Oh, it's the same building. So the odds are I would like that to have pretty much the same settings as the previous image. Let's just go back to the previous one. It's the same building. I'd like it to look just as overdone as that one did. Quickly. Right, anybody want to list, if you're in the live chat, what I did? Remember the settings? No, because I can't either. A much faster way of doing that is, there's a previous button. This button down here on the right. You've probably seen it and thought, what does that do? And there's a reset button as well. Reset would set you back. If you change it, you don't like it, you can set it back to no effects on it at all. The previous button, not quite so obvious. If I hit that previous button, it will look at the previous image and copy everything across from it. Yes, it's well too much. But I can now go into this and start making changes to it. I could go into here and I could change this here. Once I've selected that, I could say, no, it's too much. Less blue, and I need it moved. It's in the wrong place. I want to move it up there, and I want to rotate it. Now I might decide to bring it back in a little bit. Obviously, one of these images was portrait and one was landscape, so that didn't transfer very well, but everything else did. And as I bring that blue back into it and I move it up, I'm getting a blue sky, and I would probably need to do that with it. So rotate it a little bit so it's just that corner of the image. So it gives you a very good starting point for the second image. Now, the problem I've got is I've got some more pictures of this down the line. So now I'm towards the end of my images, and I want to copy that. Do I want it from the previous one? Probably not. But what I can do is go back to my original. In fact, this one's probably better for that because they are landscape. And I can right click, and within here I have develop settings. And within there, I can copy the settings. When I do, I get this huge dialog box and it's showing me lots and lots of options. And I'm just going to say, just take it all of that. Just take the whole lot. Copy that. Go on to my image, my next image, and this time go to develop settings and paste settings. And it will paste the lot on there. Now I can go to the next image and copy from the previous or do the same again. Go to develop settings and go to paste those settings on there. So I only had to really process one single image, and all of the other images that were around that image, I can copy them across. It gives me a great starting point to work with it. And that's how you develop that. Now remember what you've got here. These are non-destructive edits. They are saved in the Lightroom catalogue. They are not saved back to the images on your hard drive. So the images on your hard drive are still unprocessed. All the processing is within Lightroom. Now, before I show you how to get those images out, because once you've done all this work, you want to take your images out. You don't want to say, well, here's the original. You'd need Lightroom to see what I've done to it. But before I do that, there were some images here that we needed to work with. So I'm going to go back to my library module. And I'm going to look at all of my images. These were the images that I had today, these ones. And this one in particular, I'd selected, hadn't I? There we go, there's my image. And in answer to questions, no, that is not pink. It is a red case, a red leather case. No, it's not pink. So there's my image. That was taken today. It's got no GPS information on it. So if I go to the map, I'm not going to see that. I'm going to see a map. I'm not going to see any images on it. There we go. But I said you could add this retrospectively, so it's not a problem. So I'm going to go down here. That's the image that I'm going to be working with. I'm going to elect to search the map, and I'm based in Sale in Cheshire. So I'm typing in Sale, Cheshire, pressing enter, and that is indeed around about where I live. Not precise enough, but it's a starting point. This is Sale Town Centre in the middle, but I don't live near the town centre. So I'm going to move the map. I live over in the posh end, near all this countryside here. And that, for anybody who some people might recognise that there, believe it or not, is Manchester United's training ground. There it is. So I live very close to that. I live down here near the park. There's the park there, Woodhays Park. So I live near there. So I'm going to zoom into that so I can see it. There's the park. I'll say that was taken in the park. Here we go. And all I need to do with this image is just that. Just drag it and drop it onto the park. Now, it gives me this message, which is asking me, do you want to enable reverse geocoding? So give that a read and then make a decision about it. I'm going to say yes to enable it, because to be honest, I haven't got anything to worry about in here. So I'm going to enable that. And it then tells you that it's enabled and you are good to go. So that image there was taken there. And when I click on that, it gives me a preview of that image that was taken around there. Now, of course, all these other images, including the ones that I have rejected, all of these here were taken at exactly the same location. So once I've got my pin up there, I can drag and drop these to my pin and release it, and it will then tell me, okay, you've got 11 images that were taken in that location. And it's quite right. And that's what this is showing you over on the right hand side. It's showing you here a key to the pins that appear on your map. So that's what that is showing you there. And it's that simple to add in GPS information. If you look across on the right hand side, it's now got the GPS information. So if you do have one of these GPS devices that track it, another way to do it is to take, if you don't have a camera, if you've got your DSLR like mine, long in the tooth, doesn't have GPS on it, I do have my iPhone. So whenever I take pictures with my digital cameras and I with my DSLR and my raw taking G9, I take one photo on my iPhone and then my GPS information is on that. All I've got to do is import that photo with the rest and say copy the GPS from that photo, and that works brilliantly. Or you can just copy and paste. So you can retrospectively populate a map with this. So that was getting your images into the library, developing them and adding them to a map. The next thing you're going to want to do is to export your images, and there are a range of ways to do that. Let's get away from that terrible image and let's go back to that image, which isn't at all bad. Let's say I want to do something with this in terms of processing it. This one I haven't done anything with. So what I'm going to do is just do things with it. I'll change the exposure slightly, up the contrast a bit. Let's bring some detail back into the highlights by taking that down. Add a little bit to the shadows, and that looks a little bit brighter. So I've made some changes to that image and I want to export it. I want to do something with it. You go up to File, you go down to Export, and it will give you this huge dialog box. Right, so let's fold that up and have a look. First thing to decide, where are you sending them? Do you want to email the image, send it to a hard drive, or burn it to a CD or a DVD? Email will bypass your email client. It will actually put up a dialog box within Lightroom, that's the dialog box, and actually email the image. I want to take it out to a hard drive though. And I can specify a folder, so I can use the last folder, I can choose the same folder as the original photo. To be honest, I probably don't. I probably want to choose a folder, and I probably want that to be on my desktop. I just want one image putting on my desktop. Just choose desktop. And then it's a case of going through all of these options, which can be folded up if you don't want to see all of them, and filling them in. So I've specified a location. If there are existing files, ask what to do, but I can elect to overwrite. I can rename them. I can change the extension. If they're video files, I can change the format. I can change the format here. So what quality do I want? So let's say I want a quality of 70 for that. You can do all of that here. You can even specify the size. So let's say I want to put this onto to Twitter and I want a width of 1,000 will do there. I can do all of that. So all of the options there. One careful thing to think about is your metadata. It is going to, by default, remove the location information, which is probably a good idea. You can also say just put the copyright information in it and then the whole lot will go. So that is an important one when you're exporting. You can also put a watermark on that if you want to. And then you can do some post-processing, but I'm just going to leave it at that and say export. And it will take that image and it will put it on my desktop. And if I go to my desktop, which I have got in a window, so let's bring the window back, and there's my desktop. And my image is in untitled export there, and there is my image. So let's just have a look at that. There is the image as a JPEG all exported with all the changes that you've made for. Okay, they are the changes. Now your other way to get stuff out of Lightroom is very easy. You can choose to do it as a book. So it's populating a book as we go. There's all the images that I've got selected in my thumbnail track, added to a book. And with the book, I can select either a blurb book, which I pay to have printed, a PDF or JPEG. Now, there are a lot of companies in the UK particularly, but I'm guessing in the States too, that will print books for you. But you've got to use their software to make them. So how would you handle that? Create your book in here based on the size of their book, and at the worst case, you can take the images out as full quality JPEGs and populate their book with your images, but you've made the pages in Lightroom. Your other option is to say a PDF, and then take that and have a company print that PDF out for you. So you can do that as well. And all you've got to do in here is, in this case, it's added all of the images. You can change all of that. You can change the zoom level. So let's say I wanted to focus there on the iPad and the keyboard. I can zoom that and then move it around within the window. And you can do all of that with all of these images. You can also change, so choosing one here, you can change the type of template that you use. So if you wanted to add text to it, you could choose a different layout. If you wanted to have 2 photos per page, or 3 or 4, you can do all of that. So let's say I chose that one, and now I can add photos to this by just dragging and dropping one. So let's drag and drop that one up there, and it will populate that. I could even use the same photo twice. Nothing to stop me doing that. Are you going to do that for me? There we go. And why would I do that? Well, I can go into here. I can edit that by changing the zoom. So show you my timer. There we go. There's my timer, which is telling me I'm 3 minutes over, but I'm getting there, honestly. And for this one, I could change the zoom and show a different area of the image. So there's my notes. There's my running order. Okay, so I could do all of that in there. That's as a book. But you've also got the ability to take it out to a slideshow. You can do print, so printing your images yourself, or printing them out to a format that you're going to take and have printed, or you can even create a website for soft proofing of your images. So it will actually generate a website for you. They're not great, the websites it produces, but they're perfectly fine for proofing purposes. So maybe you're letting a client look at your images. They can go to that library and then tell you which ones that they want. So that has been a whistle-stop tour of all that you can do in Lightroom. So I'm going to go back into here and wrap up. Adobe have taken the time and built a new portal for switchers who are switching from Aperture. So if you are here tonight, as I know a lot of people are, to have a look at what Lightroom can do compared to Aperture, there is now a whole site for that. Now I'll put that link under the YouTube video and put it into the chat. And when you get to that site, the biggest thing that's there at the moment is this, which is a PDF guide, a very short 6-page guide to how to move your photos from Aperture to Lightroom today. Now, if you are thinking of doing that, I would say hold off a little bit, because Adobe are working on a plugin or an app to do that for you. So it will hopefully take a lot more than you can take today. And hopefully that will be with us by the time Yosemite is released and the new Photos app, which is replacing Aperture and iPhoto. But it's definitely worth having a read of at the moment. So that link is there for you for that. And as I said, next month we're moving on to have a look at Adobe Lightroom for mobile. There is a version for iPad and also a version for iPhone. We're going to be taking a look at both, before we move on in October to learn how to save a ton of time by automating tasks within Lightroom. So you saw some of the presets today. There's some of the things that you can do to make Lightroom work much faster for you, and that's what we'll be having a look at. And as I gave you a sneak peek of at the beginning, an extra session, a new addition to my live schedule of live sessions. And what I'm intending to do there is actually do a migration live on the night. In fact, I'll do more than one. I will do a manual migration, and I will attempt to use the migration tool, which is currently in development by Adobe. And there'll also be plenty of time for questions and answers after the session as well. So, as I said, I have been Elaine Giles. You can find me all over the internet as Elaine Giles, but specifically my blog, elainegiles.co.uk, and also Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, YouTube. You get the idea. So, thank you very much for attending. I hope you found that useful. And if you're on YouTube and you did, give it a thumbs up. And hopefully I will see you next time. At the moment, I'm going to go off into Q&A, and I will see you next time.